Hello and welcome to the Revolve Commercial Show. In this show, we take a deep dive into commercial property, conversations with experts in the field, education in commercial real estate, and I share examples of case studies of how to master good commercial acquisitions. My name is Mish and I'm the founder of Revolve Commercial, where wealth revolves around you. We've worked with thousands of commercial property owners and have been best known for helping our clients to build wealth, earn great cash flow on autopilot through commercial real estate. If you're interested in speaking with our team to see how we can help you to get your wealth to revolve around you, go to revolvecommercial.com.au.
Well, my broad goal for our family was to, it still is actually, have a portfolio of $5 million worth of commercial property on purchase price, producing $350K net inflows, cash inflows a year. So that's sort of how I set the North Star for the journey. So using that 7% yield I've just described, that was one of the criteria to look at that. So more from a cash flow perspective than a capital growth perspective, and hence the regional focus there. Second was industrial because of the durability of industrial and the durability and the versatility of it. And also just having done a little bit of research, and with your help as well in this too, just the shortage of industrial in the market, replacement costs being as high as they are, cost to build going up. We've seen that through COVID, Ukraine, and etc. Building costs, inflation, all of it coming into the picture. So that was part of it. And to get those yields, I looked at regional, which I always had in mind, regional, with that objective. And so we were looking at the Toowoomba's and the Townsvilles, everything else in between. So that was the broad objective, which was leading me down that road. Yeah.
Okay. And this property let's talk a little bit about the property that you eventually settled on, because it had a couple of red flags when we presented it. And I think the first thing was that it was owner-occupied, that it was a lease. And do you want to talk us through that process, how you felt about it, what you learned from that process?
Yeah, look, initially, when you presented that property to me and we had a discussion about it, did tick a lot of boxes. Like, I instantly went, yeah, this is where I'd like to really spend some more time in here. Let's have a look at this one. The sale leaseback, the whole experience was new for me, but sale leaseback was quite different to, obviously just a vendor on selling and so forth. So that was a great experience. So the zero sort of fear factor in going into that territory, because I know a lot of those transactions happen, but the antenna is certainly up. The risk antenna, for sure, because of that. There's a little bit of a conflicted interest in there when you're the tenant and you're the owner, and there's a bit to work through to make sure that you're on the right track and you've got the right partner. From a vendor point of view, you're going to be working with and everything's sort of playing out as well as it can. So the risk orientation that I carried kicked into gear with, obviously along with yourself and the due diligence process. So, but the property itself, thought it was attractive, and it was sort of in that sweet spot, price sweet spot, yield was solid on it. Yeah, let's take it on and see what's under the hood at the time.
Yeah, so there were a couple of hairy moments, if I remember correctly, where particularly around the lease, because bearing in mind that this property did not have a lease when we started this journey. And one of the biggest takeaways, I think, for the audience would be that I was very insistent that this lease be executed pre-unconditional. And I know we had a lot of pushback from the tenant, who's the vendor, as well as the agent who was handling it. And there was a lot of questioning and querying. Do you remember those little debates and conversations and how we tactfully worked our way around that?
Yeah, I do. And a huge thank you and the value working with someone like you, Mish, comes out in those scenarios for sure. If you left that till later, yeah, it'd be very awkward. You'd probably, possibly when it came to lease, I guess, negotiation and fine tuning, you're going to be in a position where you've lost some of that power or some of that bargaining play. So, and you're going to have someone walk away who may have bought a property, but they're actually not happy with the scenario. So
realistically, if you leave that after unconditional, they can write whatever they want in that lease.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand why buyers would do that. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to put yourself in that situation? That the selling agent's always going to push for it, and the seller or the vendor is always going to push for it. But you really got to fight hard and fight back. So we worked very well as a team there, Andrew. I can't take all the credit for that. I think we both worked as a good team in articulating what needed to be done in the lease and what your requirements were as an owner of that building. I think if I remember correctly, the vendor was looking at it obviously to his advantage, and our feedback was a lease is a document that needs to be fair and equitable to all parties.
Yep.
So what would be fair? So let's go through that lease for just a brief moment and speak a little bit about the deal. So it's an industrial deal. It's in Townsville, and the lease is 2 years. Now, we do know that the tenant is exiting the property. You were aware of that right from the get-go, and hence the 7% yield. Okay. So the risk. What did you feel about that in terms of the risk for you?
The 2 years obviously is upfront, so that wasn't so much a risk for me, but maximising how they exit that property, obviously make good comes into it, because there's a bit of work to be done, and you want that ready as much as possible for the next tenant. That was one part of it. But what's washing around inside that building that you don't know about was another part. Now, obviously, in coming back to the lease, they're trying to exclude that Building Act is often quoted in there. And that straight away is why. Why is that happening from the lawyers? And as it turns out, there was a certificate of completion missing from that building. So you ask the question why, you generally, and push for a why sometimes, where you're going to get an answer, and well, that's it. So what does that mean? For some properties, which we'll probably talk about, because there was one nearby which had exactly the same thing going on. And once you learn to do it once, you'll definitely do it the next time. You'll learn how to deal with it, I should say, the next time. So, which we did much more efficient and passed away on the other property, which subsequently did purchase. But pushing back on that sent the vendor back to the drawing board and going, right, what have I got to do to get this up to speed where I can actually sell it to an investor? If I happen to be an owner-occupier who was putting in my manufacturing business, I may not have cared as much, because I'll just deal with that down the track. But unfortunately, you're always going to have to deal with it. Whether you're an investor or an occupier, you're going to have to deal with that at some point.
At stage, absolutely, yeah.
So we stuck to our guns and we went, well, if you can deal with that, and we can get this lease for a conditional, we're going to be good. We'll do the DD and we'll go with it. See where we can land. So that happened, fortunately. So, and we, fortunately for the vendor, the certificate of completion works that needed to be done. They weren't extreme or so forth. It was really, I think, a bit of a doorway, upgrading some of the fire system. There were bits and pieces, but I don't think it was a huge process. It was probably more a pain in the backside for them, to be honest.
Which it is. And I mean, the COC, we call it the COC, it really is a requirement. And lenders, your banks are going to be looking at that. That's going to be one of the first things that they're going to ask. Your valuers are going to be looking at that as well.
Yeah.
So, from a building owner's perspective, don't waste time. Just get it done,
Yeah.
Whether you intend selling or not, it's just a piece of administration that is a requirement. Somewhere along the line, it is going to come along and bite you.
Yeah. I remember, Mish, with the property nearby, whilst we put that on ice, the property nearby, which came up, which was not too dissimilar, attractive, had a stronger yield on it. I think it had about the same lease on it there from memory, lease term, I should say. Went through the same process, same conditions came out of the contract when provided, so we pushed back on that. And they were very proactive and going, right, we'll go and get an assessment on that, which cost quite a few grand actually to get done. The list to fix those issues was more extensive.
You remember what was on that list?
Yeah, I remember a few things. There were things like hallways weren't to regulation that were going down into the toilets. So that was going to require a whole wall and new doorways to be put in. There was question marks about a modification of the shed for a gantry crane. That's a big deal.
Yep.
And then there was a car park with a covering that was out the back that hadn't gone through the right channels to be built. And there are numerous things. Really good asset, really good property. A little bit more modern than the one we ended up purchasing. But all of those things said, that's too much to really achieve. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, we got to a stage where the vendor was kind of saying, this is going to take 6 months.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I couldn't see where he was going with 6 months, because if you really want to sell your building, you'd have a lot of those things that you mentioned sorted out a lot quicker. He could have had them done a lot quicker. So we unanimously decided to walk away from that one, and we went and reignited the flame on the property that you ended up buying. And I think for good reasons.
Yeah.
The takeaway for that is, and you get a lot of these properties that have belonged to the same owner for 20, 25 years plus. They've run their businesses out of these buildings, and they've just added on and tacked on and added on and tacked on. And a lot of those buildings that they might have tacked onto the back. So this one in particular that we were talking about had a basic structure in the front. It had drive-through that went all the way down the one side, around and out the other side. And the owner of the business and building had added on some sheds in the back. And that is where the problems were with those sheds in the back.
Yeah.
I think he'd got a couple of mates to tack those sheds up. They were fairly sturdy and stable. They just didn't go through the right certification. So something to watch for in due diligence. Be aware and always ask the questions.
Yeah, the big one, I think, with that property, Mish, I looked at the drawings when we got the contract and information when we started DD there.
Yep.
And the drawings did not have a gantry crane exit and a gantry crane coming out of the building. Yes. In the original drawing. So straight away I'm thinking, well, the picture I'm looking at definitely has that coming out of the building, so it's there. It's not in the drawing, so someone has put it in somewhere along the line. And the vendor, I remember the vendor saying, we just bought this as is, because they were going to use it and it suited them. They didn't actually put that gantry crane in. But what has happened there, as a typical owner-occupier that they were, they didn't really care too much about it because it suited them. But now they had come to sell it. It was going to cause a headache for them. And I think, if I remember rightly, they did end up selling that place, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was going to be an owner-occupier, perhaps, or perhaps a cash buyer said, look, take a couple of $100,000 off, we'll sort it out.
Thank you for joining us on the Revolve Commercial Property Podcast. Don't forget to join our private Facebook group, Cashflow on Autopilot with Revolve Commercial, where we share weekly updates on positive cash flow commercial properties currently on the market and how to acquire them. So go to Cashflow on Autopilot with Revolve Commercial or www.revolvecommercial.com.au.